All right, good evening. Welcome. Thank you all for being here this evening. We are continuing our study of Ecclesiastes. I'm very loud tonight, louder than normal. Thinking about 5:13 to 6:12, which basically takes us to the end of chapter 6. If you're looking in the text for this, if you're looking for the happy, joyous, yay passage, this isn't it. All right. It's hard to say that the passage is joyful and amazing when twice Kohelet says some version of it's so bad it makes me sick, right? When he says in the ESV it is a grievous evil, okay, the word for grievous is literally the idea of a sickening, just, we would say that when you see something awful or you see something tragic, you would say that makes me sick. That's the idea, something that's so bad that it literally turns your stomach. A text that says that twice is now obviously on the darker end of things. But understand the reason for that darkness. We've now looked at the world under the sun. We've looked at the world without God and really examined it to see everything that's there to find. And the result of looking at the world that way is you wind up seeing a very dark, very awful place. And I think this is the strongest argument that you're going to see in the text for why God is not just necessary, but why He's better. Because we look at life, we can look at life to the extreme of the things that people want without Him, and it's still not worth it. Right? We're going to see that also as we look in our text. Let's offer a word of prayer, and then we'll read it, and then we'll think more about it. Our Lord and our God, thank You for the opportunity to gather this evening. Thank You for creating us in Your image, for letting us know not just that You are powerful, but that You are good, that You love us. Father, the world around us would communicate that it does communicate Your power and it communicates Your intelligence, but it's Your special revealed will that reveals that You are good and that You love us, and that You sent Your Son for us. Father, help us to appreciate that the more we study this text that we're thinking about this evening. Help us to see the world through Kohelet's eyes and to recognize it to be so. Help us to take the things that we learn in this book and share them with the people that are around us, particularly those who are defiantly living their lives as if You do not exist. Help us to show them the world as it is, and then show them how much better it is when we know You and when we serve You. Father, we ask You to forgive us of our sins. We pray that You would be with those who are sick and dealing with ongoing health issues among us. Help us, Father, as not just to desire that You would help, for we know that You will and You are faithful in that, but that we would open our hands and we would strengthen them to do what we can to be a help as well. Father, we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, let's get the text in front of us. So we'll have, I think, 4 readers tonight. The first section is 5:13 to 16, and then we'll get another volunteer for verse 18. All right, 5:13 to 16, Ryan. Yes, I'm sorry, 5:13 to 17. I can't read. All right, there you go.
I have seen a grievous evil under the sun, wealth hoarded to the harm of its owner, or wealth lost through some misfortune, so that when he has a son, there is nothing left for him. Naked a man comes from his mother's womb, and as he comes, so does he depart. He has nothing for his labor that he can carry in his hand. This too is a grievous evil. As a man comes, so he departs, and what does he gain, since he toils for the wind?
And then verse 17, I'm sorry.
All his days he eats in darkness, and with great frustration, affliction, and anger.
All right. If someone's just now joining us on YouTube, they're thinking, what have I just gotten into? I thought this was Bible class. It is.
Very uplifting.
It is. When you take the God out of the world, this is the type of thing you see. All right. 5:18 through 20. Please, the next person. Go ahead, Crystal.
Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all of the toil with which one toils under the sun the few days of his life that God has given him, for this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them. will not much remember the days of his life because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart.
Okay. The person who logged in to read this section and thought, what on earth have I gotten myself into, has now seen this section. They're going, now I really don't know what's going on. Because you just said everything's futile, and you work and you gain things, and now the people who depend on those things don't have anything. But then you go to the next section, which is not that one, it's that one. And now we're talking about how good and how fitting it is. What's the difference in the two paragraphs?
God.
God's mentioned repeatedly here, and he's not mentioned at all here. I think that's part of the point. And we're going to think more about what exactly the point's being made here and the sorts of arguments that he makes. Part of this book, and part of what I've been trying to grow in and trying to really understand is, how does he go from the examination of the world without the Son, or with the world without God, and then all of a sudden there are these little glimpses of here's what it could be, right? It's sort of, it's jarring when you get that big of a contrast. I'm going to think more about what he's doing with those sorts of things in just a second. Next volunteer, chapter 6, verses 1 through 6. All right? So, all right, go ahead, Rita.
There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires. Yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It is a grievous evil. If a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he also has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he, for it comes in vanity and goes in darkness, and in darkness its name is covered. Moreover, it has not seen the sun or known anything, yet it finds rest rather than he. Even though he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good, do not all go to the one place.
All right. Now, the person who started paragraph 1, and there's no God and everything's awful, in paragraph 2, God's mentioned several times and things are much better. What do you do with paragraph 3? Because God's mentioned here, but it's not exactly comforting. Right? This is part of the interesting challenge of Ecclesiastes. It's not written like any other book. It is completely unique in that. But the interesting thing about that is that not everything he says is completely unique. Right? In the last section, there were things that you probably recognize from a different biblical book. See anything in that paragraph that looked familiar?
For which the prophet of man gave the whole world to Moses.
Right. So Jesus taught something very, very almost akin to this, right? Maybe even referencing this. What else?
15 is Job.
You've got Job's story sort of highlighted here, and even the same line, right? As you know, he's born with nothing, and he's going to go back that way, right? This paragraph is really, really interesting, right? The beginning of chapter 6. Okay, 7 and then, or verse 7 through verse 12, and that'll be the end of the reading for the day. All right, go ahead.
All the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. What advantage hath the wise man over the fool? And what does the poor man who knows how to conduct himself before the Lord? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. This also is vanity and the striving after wind. Whatever has come to be has already been named, and it is known what man is, and that he is not able to dispute with one stronger. The more words, the more vanity. And what is the advantage to man? For who knows what is good for man while he lives the days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow? For who can tell man what will be after him under the sun?
All right. For me, and this, however valuable my opinion is, this is the darkest section in Ecclesiastes. Right? There is the least amount of hope. There's a little bit of a glimpse of it there at the end of chapter 5. But it is just like hammer blow after hammer blow of awful things that happen in our world. Right? It's like, it's very, very different, right, to sort of read through that. Again and again with the emphasis that this last paragraph in particular, it forces the person who refuses to acknowledge that God exists. And it says, what are you going to do about that? Right? These are all questions that the person who is atheist, or at the very least agnostic, they have to reckon with that. They have to reckon with human limitation. They have to reckon with what happens after you die. They have to reckon with everything in that last paragraph. All of the questions in the last paragraph have an answer to us, but not to the person who has no God. Right? This chapter is dragging the reader kicking and screaming through that conclusion to force them to see this is our world. And if you do not have God in it, then there are some things you simply cannot answer. Before we jump to questions, what did you see? What did you notice? What did you think was interesting or challenging or odd? And please only answer if you had a chance to read it before right now, okay? Because, I mean, we can kind of sit and read it together, but it works a lot better if you've read it before right now, right? Because you've had a chance to actually marinate on it. Yep.
I thought the interesting part is this section tells you how are all the ways that you can lose your money. In a way, into all the different things that could happen that you did not plan on when you accumulated your wealth.
Yep.
That can take your money and leave you impoverished and you can't do anything about it.
5, 10 through 10 and 10, 11 is an interesting sort of trifecta of literally all the bad things that can happen. Money hurts you when you have it, it hurts you when you don't, and it hurts other people who depended on you supposed to have it when and you don't now anymore, right? These are the sorts of the things that can happen in that situation, right? What else? What did you see? Yeah, and then you'll be next, Ryan.
It seems to me that from, actually, of course, it's on the paragraph. You would live to be 200 if you had 120 plus kids. And you work all your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you mentioned the living to an extreme old age, right? You mentioned the excess of kids. There's a third thing. There's a third thing in that section. A third kind of a overwhelming thing that he describes. What if a person had this? What's that thing? Wealth, right? What if you had everything and you could desire absolutely nothing? Even the wealthiest in our world don't have that. They have a lot, but they don't have that. And he asked that question, just like you said, if you have all of these things, then what? Right?
There's been stories going around, it's true, in this deal with Boone County, if you had 100 acres of land, and you get 75,000 an acre, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
How good is it?
Most people sold it and took the money. There are a few holdouts who didn't, but what does it profit you, as was mentioned a moment ago, if you've gained all of these things and there's no God which you serve, right? What's the event that renders all of that completely worthless and nothing? He mentions it in the text, kind of obliquely, but he does mention it.
Yes.
Do not all go to one place. No matter how many kids you have, no matter how much money you have, no matter how long you live, you eventually die.
And you can't take it with you.
It doesn't go with you. You have no one to tell you what happens on the other side, if there is anything on the other side.
The other thing, it was one of the things that it was interesting as I thought about it, and it's the flip side. He mentions the fact that you have all this wealth, and then it ends up going to a foreigner, somebody that you don't know, and they've come in and taken it. And I just thought, remember when God gave them the land, when Joshua is leading them in, God told them that you're going to inherit a land that plants you did not, crops you did not plant, vineyards you did not dress. He tells them you're going to inherit a land just like that. I mean, somebody else did all the labor and all the work, and you're going to receive the benefit of it.
Yep. In a matter of weeks, years, the very wealthy Canaanites were gone. For the most part, and that was that. Ryan.
I think as dark as this is, for me, there's a really bright light in there that God not only gives me the time, He gives me the wealth and possessions that I
Right.
need, whatever that looks like.
Right.
And it's okay to be content with those things. That's the gift, is understanding that what I have is enough, and that whatever else I need, He will provide me with. As dark as all those other people look at it, man, we gotta work, we gotta do all these things, but when I know the truth and that sets me free, that shapes my mind in spite of all of this darkness.
The worldview that doesn't include God, it's often lifted up as the intellectually superior position, right? Well, if you were as enlightened or as smart or as whatever as I am, then you wouldn't believe in religion. Religion is just, the opiate of the masses, right? It's just the delusion that makes you feel comfortable at night. This book, and in particular this section, goes, is it really? Let's look at the world without it. And this is the darkest parts of it, right? And that's what makes the end of chapter 5 so, like you said, so incredibly bright. Is that when you see the world in that state as it is, and then you think, well, what if there's a God? Now there's meaning and purpose and joy and true fulfillment, right? Not, all those other things. Bob?
And we talk about death. One of the things I thought about is that's when these people realize how they messed up. When they're going to die. You always hear about people wanting to do deathbed confessions and all that kind of stuff. At the very end, they know they're going to die, they're facing death. I need to fix this. My whole life has been a travesty. I need to fix this all at once before I see God, because there might be a God.
Yeah, there's been several accounts of that sort of thing happening, right? Right there at the end. Well, maybe I wasn't so
Just
sure.
in case.
It's the equalizer for sure. Like he puts it, right? Do not all go to one place. It is the equalizer in our world. Yeah.
I think from a very young age we realized that life isn't fair, and we always want it to be. And one of the arguments against God is, if there was a God, life would be fair. This says no, it isn't. Sometimes you lose everything through no fault of your own. When I read this, I thought of the 1929, the stock market collapse.
Yep.
People who had done everything right in their life lost everything they had, and that's not fair. But that's the world.
What did you guys think, before I get to the questions, what did you guys think about verses 7, 8, and 9 in chapter 6? I tried to give a bit of an explanation there in the actual lesson, which, if you haven't noticed, I despise reading stuff that I wrote to people. But I thought that was an interesting argument, looking at the world without God, to make. Which is better, to be wise or to not be hungry? The conclusion of that argument is you're better off being hungry. You can be wise all you like, but isn't that odd? Just it's a really neat argument, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. If it's such that the world is better, it's the survival of the fittest notion, right? The one with the most resources wins. There is another thing. There's a phrase that if I started it, you'd be able to finish it, and I think it comes from chapter 5 and verse 20, right? The phrase goes, "Time flies when you're having fun." That's 5 and verse 20, isn't it? Right? God keeps the person occupied with joy in his heart, and he will not much remember the days of his life. The other, one way or the other. In Ecclesiastes, there are several of what one author called oasis passages, right? There are little breaks, there are little breaths of air as you move through the text, and they stand as contrasts to what's moving forward. This is something I really struggled with through the first couple of chapters, and the more I'm going through the book slowly, the more comfortable I am with seeing them. But you'll notice every time the sort of oasis happens, the emphasis is on God's actions, right? God is the one who allows us to not only have the things that we do, but to enjoy the things that we have, right? He gives us the power to do with those things as we would like. And without that, chapter 6 states, you're wasting your time, right? Some would say, well, I'll just have all the benefits, but I don't need God. And they fail to recognize that God's the one who enables you to enjoy the thing, not just have it, right? And that's why you get that contrast there in the beginning of chapter 6, right? It's God's gift, it's God's lot, it's things that God has given him, right? As you'll see there in chapter 5. Okay. Easy questions. The 3 ways riches betrayed their owner in verses 13 and 14 in chapter 5. What were the 3 ways that the riches betrayed their owner? I tried to color code them, so maybe they'd be easier to find. All right. What are the 3 things that happens? Riches betray their owner when?
He keeps them.
When they're kept, or I think, Ryan, your version says hoarded, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, riches kept to the detriment of their owner. You can see that kind of thing happening, right? So that's the first one. What's number 2?
You mess up and lose them.
Right? Riches are lost how?
In a bad venture.
In a bad investment. You notice, and I know this because I remember not having anything. I wasn't real interested in investment when I had nothing. Right? It's like, invest what? I'm trying to eat here, right? I'm eating ramen noodles. What do you want me to put in the stock market, you know? But it's when you get a little bit of money and you get a little bit more than whatever you need to buy your ramen noodles that you start thinking, well, how can I make more of it? Well, what do? We take it and we invest it. Is investing wrong? No. Is it good stewardship? Possibly. But it also comes with risk. One of the things riches can do is evaporate when you put them in a venture that you don't. Nobody puts it in a venture knowing it's going to fail, right? I mean, nobody signs up for bad investments, but some of them are. And all the things and all the time and all the effort you spent gaining whatever that was is just gone. You mentioned the crash of the stock market. That's when a lot of people's money went into dust and couldn't find it anymore. And then people were jumping out of buildings because they don't have their money anymore. Okay, so what's the third one? The third means by which riches betray their owners.
No inheritance.
Okay, so how does that work?
They're broke. There's nothing left for his families,
Yeah,
his children.
the people who were depending on you to have that, they now don't have what they need. So it's not just you that suffers, it could be those who depend on you. This isn't to say that this happens all the time. It's to say that it does happen. Right? These are things that can happen and do often happen. Okay, what do you notice about the way Koheleth described possessions, children, and life in the first 5 verses of chapter 6? Because he says that, right? He says, what if a person has, stuff? What if they have children? What if they have life? What's unique about the way he says it?
They don't amount to much.
Well, eventually they don't amount to much, but I mean before you get to the conclusion.
No.
They're gifts from God. And
They are, right? Are they realistic? That a person could have everything he ever could possibly desire? No. What about the 100 children part? I hope not, right?
Because they need a whole
No, we're not doing that. What?
Well, Solomon, though, I mean,
Yeah, no one's going to argue he was better off for that.
I'm just saying, he described, you would think, why would you put 100 children on there? Really? But you think about, if it's Solomon, yeah, he had 100 children.
Could have been, right?
Yeah,
These are exaggerations.
yeah.
If someone fathers 100 kids, if someone lives, what does it say in verse 6? 1,000 years twice over, right? It's exaggerations for effect. He's not actually interested in what if a person lives for 2 millennia, right? It's an argument. And the argument is what? All of these things, now I put it in the notes too, but in the sort of Eastern understanding of what it meant to be blessed, it fell in 3 categories, right? Money, children, and life, right? If you had those 3, you were the blessed man, and the more of them you had, the better. This section says, what if you have them to a degree that no human has ever had them?
At some point, they're all going to go away. They're all transitory.
Yep. How much of it doesn't solve your problem? Right? You can have these things to degrees that you could never fathom. And without a God who's giving you the ability to enjoy them, or some hope of what happens when you're gone, it's just dust. It's useless. It's vanity. It's breath. Right? It's a good argument. Did anybody go through and find the references to God giving people things throughout, up to chapter 6? This was sort of a digging back through the text homework style question. How many times did God do that roughly? If somebody wants to, yes?
Well, I was just gonna mention, it's interesting to me, this section, and sorry, what we were just talking about, like
Yeah.
6:1 through 5. This to me almost is kind of a mirror image of chapter 2, where he's talking about his own personal experience of having done all of these things, right? Like, and so he went out and he experienced all those things, and he said, like, it's all vanity. This is sort of the depersonalized version of that. Like, we took this lived experience, I went and did all of these things, and we've made it into this more proverbial way of looking at it.
Right.
Right. I mean, even how it's structured and things that he did is very, very similar to how he lays out the argument in chapter 2. Even like going through all the children, like all the enjoyment, like all of those things. Even wisdom and folly, right, which is in the next section. So it's just interesting how he returns to that same idea, but we're moving away from that, like, I personally did it, into more, here's how you can understand this a little bit more theoretically.
Certainly. He's making the same case, and he's making it stronger this time. Because now it's even in excess of what he did. Right? If you took all the variables and you multiplied them as much as you wanted to, does it change the math? No, it doesn't. Right? But I like that. That's a really good catch. When God gives people things, what'd you notice in the text? It happens a lot, by the way. Right? In verse 13, it's an unhappy business that God's given to the children of man. He says, even God permits these people who don't want to have anything to do with him something to do, right? It doesn't give them fulfillment, but it is something that they're given. In 2 and verse 26, the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom, knowledge, and joy, and to the sinner he has given the business of gathering and collecting. He's again in 3 and verse 10, I've seen the business that God has given to the children of man, and it just goes on and on and on. What's the point of all those? He's building an argument, right? It's like the fact that we're doing anything in this world is because God gave us the ability and the time and the resources to do them. There is nothing that we do that's not enabled by Him or permitted by Him or that kind of thing, right? To try to look at the world without Him is increasingly, difficult and it's always been foolish, but it's even more so once you see kind of how it's working. Once you see the argument building, still trying to go about saying, well, I don't want Him, I don't need Him, it's illogical. Yeah.
And these are things God has given to everyone. You can't get to the end of the book and say, well, yeah, sure, you believe in God. He gave you all that stuff. He didn't give me anything.
Yeah, this is the world we're in, right? This is life under the sun, right? Not just life for God's people. Okay, let's think about some more about what the things mean. How would his warnings about what wealth can do to you, not what it necessarily does to you, but what it can do to you, how would that help us understand and maybe think more about saving and investment and so on, right? We recognize 13 and 14 in chapter 5 don't always happen all the time, right? But they do happen some of the time. So how would that help us do those things wisely, right? Because none of them intrinsically are wrong of themselves, right? It is not wrong to have wealth, and it is not wrong to invest it, and it's not wrong to have people who depend on you. They're called children, right? If that's wrong, I'm in trouble. How can we do that better after looking at those two verses? Any suggestions? Or
There's, we have an old term that says, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
okay,
Another advice, always advice for investing is never invest more than you would be willing to just lose. You have to understand when you invest it, you might lose everything that you invest here. So a wise person doesn't go all in on something that might fail.
yep. No such thing as a sure thing, right? And it's not wise, like I said, to be single in your target, right? Diversify those things. What else? Yes, sir.
Also, money quickly gained can be quickly lost. If
Yep.
you're going to be a good steward of the wealth that God gives you, if you have a due diligence to, if you're going to invest, you ought to research and don't go, into something unprepared, unresearched, just for the sake of trying to make a quick buck.
Certainly.
Because you're not being a good steward, you're not being wise or responsible with what's been given to you.
Right.
And then you might find yourself with your hands, hat in hand, looking, for more money because you've got nothing left.
Absolutely. Kendrick? And then Mike, you're next.
The way I read it is be responsible with what you have, pay attention to what you do with it, make sure you've got something
Right. I mean, as you know, it's like the phrase from another text, right? As much as lies within you, right? There is some point in which we've done the best that we can, but having a clear view of what it can do gives us some warning about it. Mike?
I like the point of the Oasis passages, that this is telling us how to live in a world like we're in.
Yes.
And it is true that I can have a heart attack before I finish this sentence and die. And so how should I live then in those circumstances? In verse 13, the riches did not betray man. Man didn't use his riches correctly. He kept these riches to his own hurt. And he goes down and shows the proper use of some of these things that he mentions. His soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he also has no bear. That kind of a statement. How can you not be satisfied with the good side things of life? That's reflecting on the attitude you have toward these things. He's telling us not to have those attitudes. That's what I see coming out in some of these negative passages.
Certainly. What's cool about Ecclesiastes is, like I said, this is sort of the darkest bit. It starts to get lighter as we go forward, and we're going to see more of that, as Mike put it, how to live life in the world that we're in, right? A realistic look at things and how do we actually live best here. We're going to see a lot more of those kind of as we go forward. Chapter 7 is a great place to see a lot of that, right?
In verse 18, that's the one.
What's that? I'm sorry.
Verse 18, behold, what I've seen to be good and fitting is to eat and to drink and to find enjoyment. And all the toil which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given to him. That's a pretty positive statement.
Yeah. Why is it positive?
This is God's gift.
That's the key. Without that, there is no positive thing. There's just whatever happens before you die, and that's it. It's because God gave you that. You then have it has a positive side to it. Dennis, and then Kendrick, you'll be next.
I heard somebody say one time that part of it is just keeping the right perspective. Money is a tool. It allows you to do things. When you run into trouble is when money becomes the end goal. And then it's no longer a tool, then you're living for the money. You're not using it for whatever that may be, your home, your kids, your whatever you're doing with it. When the money becomes the goal, there's a problem.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Off what Mike said, you could give me a pretty miserable job, like any miserable job that you can think of, and if I have the right person or people with me, it will be a lot of fun. You know what I mean? Like, doing it by yourself is miserable.
Yeah.
You know, but if you've got, you know, one of your guys with you or two of your guys with you, I mean, you can absolutely turn that, you know, shovel into a pretty fun event.
Yeah, the trick, or not the trick, but you see in 5 and verse 19, to rejoice in his toil. It's less about how much of the thing you have and the experience and what you did and how you stewarded that thing, however much it was, right? All right, one more and then we got to press on.
Yeah, so I was telling that today, we were kind of having a bit of a rough day with the DMV between Florida and Indiana, and there were some problems.
Indiana's BMV gives you trouble? Do tell. Do
Right,
tell.
Florida, it's a lot, I'm sure you know.
Oh, man.
So it's things like, you know, I hate folding clothes, but God gave me clothes to fold. I hate having to deal with these kinds of things, but God gave me a car and vehicles to have to do this with. You know,
Right.
you hate having to do the maintenance on the house, but you have a house. So what is your perspective behind what's been given to you, and how will you steward it, rather than, do I have to do this again, or am I buying all these things for my own purposes? But keeping a good perspective on where those things come from and what God intends us to use them for can really change your outlook on your situation and what you're doing.
Absolutely. Before we go to the next question, I will say, as far as BMV goes, we have a common enemy, and that's Mississippi. All right? If you've never been to Mississippi, I'll inform you on that one day. All right. 5 lines that remind you of the story of Job. We talked about one of them already, right? 5 lines or 5 somethings in the text that remind you of Job. Just one.
Naked came I from my mother's room to
Right.
I go.
Sort of the classic one, right? In 5 and verse 15. Because that's the thing Job said, right? Naked I came and naked I shall go. And Kohelet sort of repeats that wisdom. All right, what else? Lines in the text that remind you of something you've read or seen in the book of Job.
Darkness, vexation, sickness, and anger.
Yeah. How about the quality of his life, right? Darkness, vexation, sickness, and anger. Okay, what else?
The end of 6 and verse 3 kind of reminds me when Job was really hopeless and saying, better off that I'm dead.
Yes.
Better off that I never.
Yes. So I'm glad you said that. You said 6 and verse 3? Yeah. I'll read you something from Job 3. This is, if I can find Job 3. Job 3 and in verse 16. That whole idea of mentioning the stillborn. He says in 3 and verse 13, this is very early in his laments in the book. He says, why was I not as a hidden stillborn child, as infants who never see the light? Not just the mention of the stillborn child, but the fact of being hidden, right? You see that in the text. The child whose name is covered. An infant who never sees the light. You see that here in the text with the reference to darkness in that same thing. It's really neat to consider that perhaps he had access to the book of Job and wrote things that were in keeping with that, right? One's life without God, it becomes like Job's experience. Now, Job was never godless, right? But if you don't have God, you wind up in a similar sort of circumstance. There are lots of things in this section that would either allude to something in Job's experience or reference something that he said. I think about 5 and verse 19, right? Everyone to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them. Job was a man that was given wealth and possessions and all these things, and God permitted all of that to be stripped from him. And then at the end of his life, he was given all those things back and given the power to go forth and enjoy those things again. Right? Whether or not Job had all these things didn't change how quickly he could lose them or gain them. Right? It was all according to what God would allow to have happen to him or to give him even after those things were over. There's just a lot of references here. Okay, towards the end of the section, all right, 6 and verses 10 through 12. If you didn't know what I meant by hammer and anvil, you sort of have to look at the end of the lesson. That's sort of the way I characterize this. These truths I call the anvil, right? These are the things that just are true. They are unchangeable. They are unmoving, right? What are those 3 truths in this section? If you want to take one of them, you do that. What's the first one that's referenced there in verse 10? There is nothing new under the sun. We saw that argument in chapter 1, right? The earth comes, the earth goes, nothing changes, and you know, even when we think we've done a thing, it's already been done before. There is nothing new we can accomplish, right? What's the second truth?
Man is what he is.
We are what we are.
It's never going to change. It's always been that way, and it's never going to change.
We are what we are. Why is there not a world record 2-minute mile? Why hasn't a man ever lifted 2,000 pounds over his head?
There's a limitation.
Or jumped 9 feet in the air? There are just physical limitations to being human. We just are what we are. We are born. We have yet, in all of our millennia of being on this planet, we have yet to figure out a way to produce more humans other than the original. Someone made the point years ago, and I'll never forget this. We have not figured out how to manufacture blood. For all of our medical advancements, we cannot manufacture that substance. Right? We just are human. There are just things that limit us. The word that's used here for human is the word Adam. It is known what Adam is, basically, is what it says. We are a known, finite, identifiable quantity. What's the third truth? We are not able to dispute with one stronger than ourselves, right? We cannot dispute with others. Whatever or whoever the thing is, we cannot contend with things that are superior. All right? Try as we might, the people affected by the rain that happened and the flooding that happened could not, by effort and strength, prevent that. There are just things that are beyond us. There are people that are beyond us. There are forces that are beyond us, and we are helplessly caught in those sorts of things. I was reminded of something Paul wrote, and this is sort of as a part of a different argument, but this is 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 22. Paul sort of reminds his audience, you need to remember who you are and what you're dealing with. 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 22, in this, he comes back and forth. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons. Shall we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than He? Just sort of a reminder from Paul, you need to remember who you're dealing with here. You're not dealing with a person. God says of Himself, right, is the Lord's arm shortened? Do you think I'm incapable? Sort of incredulously asking the Israelites that question. These are just truths, and there is nothing, believer in God or not, that we can do about them. I saw a wave. Who had it? Yep.
Yeah, it reminds me of the other Job passages. I think it begins in 35, where he starts asking him, "Where were you when I hung the stars? Are you the one who makes the lightning go to and fro? Do you make the rain? Like, who are you to contend with me? You're merely a man, and I am God. What business do you have to not only think you can think like me, but to even question my thoughts?"
Right. In all those chapters, God never once explains why He did what He did. But He spends several chapters explaining, you are not who you think you are. And I am beyond what you think I am. Right? These are just truths. Now, how do those truths reckon with these three questions? Remember, these are the three questions that the person, every one of us has to reckon with this. Right? What's the first one? What's the answer to the first question? The more words, the more vanity, and what is the advantage to man? You've heard the expression, you can talk about it till you're blue in the face? What does that mean? Doesn't do you any good. Yep. You can talk till you're blue in the face, and you will not change any of those three things. There is nothing new. We are limited, finite, bounded creatures. And when things arise or when we deal with God, there is no contending with someone superior to us. That truth is unchanging, right? And we can talk about it all we want. What about the second question? Who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow? What's the idea in this question? Yep.
We need to find something outside of us that can answer that, because we're not able to.
We haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah.
Right. What about the third question? Who can tell man what will be after him under the sun? What's the idea here?
It's the futility of what you decide to leave. You think, I'm going to leave something, and what you leave may be totally worthless.
Mm-hmm.
You have no way of knowing whether it will have value.
Yep. One of those most basic limitations of being human is that we die. Or at least when you look at the world kind of as it is, right? If you sort of ignore the origin story. You look at the world as it is, we die. The question that we cannot deal with outside of God is, what happens next? Who can tell us? Right? That's why people who get on YouTube and say, I've had a near-death experience, or I've been to the other side and I've come back. There's even a video of a guy says he went to hell and came back. I'm like, no, he didn't. You had a bad dream or a bad sandwich or something. I don't know, but that did not happen. But they get millions of views from people because they're like, maybe there's a shot. Maybe someone did go after that and then come back to tell us what happens. The person who believes in God has answers to these. And the person who looks at the world under the sun only does not. Right? Okay, well, we made it through some of them. Oh, bother. I was going to talk about that one too. All right. We may bring up a couple of these next time if we can find time to do that. Wow, okay, not bad. Let's think about chapter 7 next week. Okay, the first, this is a large section, so there's a good chance we'll have to sort of do what we can. But thank you guys for your comments and for jumping in. All right, I'm glad we had discussion tonight. That was awesome.